close on. You're on now. Okay.
Welcome to Christ Church Bible Study, Thursdays Bible Study on the Gospel of Mark. I'm Pastor Charlie Hara with Christ Church. We're sitting in one of the ante-rooms to the Seaville Community Church, Church of the Nazarene. Seashore, what did I say, Seaville?
Yeah.
See, you guys got to help me here. This is audience participation Thursday. Seaview. And Seashore.
Seashore Church of the Nazarene.
In Irma.
Right.
Thank you.
It's okay, it's live.
Next week.
All right.
Cue cards next week.
We're in Mark 11, verses 27 to 33. Any corrections on that? Just so I know if I made it that far. Mark 11, 27 to 33. Somebody read that one for us, please, and let's see if we can pull this out of the dumpster as soon as I had started. Anyone? Mark 11, 27 to 33.
They arrived again in Jerusalem, and while Jesus was walking in the temple courts, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders came to him. "By what authority are you doing these things?" they asked. "And who gave you authority to do this?" Jesus replied, "I will ask you one question. Answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I am doing these things. John's baptism, was it from heaven or of human origin? Tell me." They discussed it among themselves and said, "If we say from heaven," he will ask, "then why did you believe him? But if we say of human origin," they feared the people, for everyone held that John really was a prophet. So they answered Jesus, "We don't know." Jesus said, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things."
Thank you. What do you see there? What stands out for you in that one?
Probably one of the best political answer question with a question.
It's the old, yeah, and it may be stereotypical, but there's a lot of truth to it.
yeah.
The Jewish way of answering the question with a question.
Right.
Rabbi, is it true that that you're trained to answer questions with questions? Why do you ask? What else do you see there?
Well, he's been doing that consistently with them. So this is why Stray,
Yeah,
during his final week.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good mechanic to resort to if you're Jesus. Yeah, but it also shows the brilliance of Christ. I mean, they come with that question. First of all, let's start with the they. Who's doing all of this? Who's the ones involved in this?
The scribes and Pharisees and who else?
Elders.
Elders.
Yeah. So, how would we summarize these people? Are these ignorant louts out of the street? Who are these people?
Well educated.
Well educated. They're in where? We're in Jerusalem. So this is the cream of the crop. By scribes. What are we talking about with scribes?
The recorders of the
Historian.
Yeah, they're the ones who wrote it. So these are literate people. They could read and write and do arithmetic. What's the point of that? Well, again, these are the ones that dealt with the scriptures. They were the copyists of the Bible. So they became so associated with the scriptures, they were sometimes just referred to as lawyers. It's not the legal profession that we think of as teachers of the law, as the NIV puts it. And who else shows up?
Chief priest.
Okay, chief priests. So those are the ones who run essentially the rituals of Judaism throughout the entire nation and all of Judaism. This is ground zero. This is the Mecca, if you want to mix your metaphors. This is the Mecca of Jewish traditions and all faiths. And these are the ones who do all the rituals and oversaw and kept the temple going. So you got the ones who knew the Bible, you have the ones who knew the religion, and then you have who else showing up here? elders, who are the lay people, but these are the lay people that would have been responsible for synagogue worship. And so, again, this is the upper crust of Jewish society. They show up. He's now inside Jerusalem again. So, again, if you remember, he's going back and forth from the town of Bethany, the little village of Bethany, a mile and a half outside of the east border of Jerusalem, comes walking over the temple, over the Mount of Olives to get into the temple. He's there, and they show up. They've been watching him. I mean, again, remember, we've got Jerusalem at this stage, because this is Passover, with probably a good 1 million people in and around it. So it's not easy to find one guy in the middle of 1 million people. So they had to have had him tagged and monitoring him. Nothing unusual there. When he was in the fields in Galilee up north, they were following him and watching him eat grain out of the fields. So he was marked, meaning spies were out and they could target who he was and where he was doing.
Plus, he was very popular. He had his own traveling entourage.
You got it.
And especially after the entry.
Yes, exactly. So when the crowd begins to coalesce around somebody, they knew where to find him. The point is, they're watching him. What were they troubled with about Jesus? They present him with a problem.
His authority.
Yeah.
For what? His authority for what? You got to get that part out, and then we have to
Preaching the word of God.
His authority, okay, but chiefly it says, by what authority are you doing these things? That's the authority of that particularly, these things. So let's figure out what these things they're referring to. You've got the upper crust, the Jewish leaders, in the capital city, beside the temple, coming down to this itinerant rabbi, unschooled and untrained as it were, and they want to know about what authority you're doing these things. What were these things that he's doing?
All the miracles.
The miracles.
I was going to say, well, this is culminating over how many, several years. So, like you said, healings, teachings.
Okay.
So, I mean, I even pose the question then, what's easier to do? Tell someone that they're forgiven their sin or heal them.
Yeah.
So
it's all of that, but if we take just what had happened in the past 2 days, what had happened in the past 2 days that these things might be referring to, certainly his teachings and the miracles and the trouble he's causing, all of that is behind this. But these things seem to be built around the temple. What had just happened, and it's within this chapter that we've been studying. Although if you've taken trips out west, you didn't study it with us, but that's not my fault. What did he just do?
Well,
Go
he
ahead.
was doing some housekeeping in his father's house.
You got it.
So,
He's literally trying to clean his father's house for his father. The temple cleansing. And what else did he do at the temple cleansing? There was a couple of things there.
he also was doing teaching too.
Good.
So,
And there's one that only Matthew gives you the heads up on. Let me read to you the temple cleansing in Matthew. This is Matthew 11. Don't turn to it. You can trust me. I'm ordained. Matthew 11, verses 14 and 15. This is the temple cleansing, and it says, from the days of Amsterdam, wait a minute. Matthew 11. That wasn't, isn't it? Let me see. Somebody moved it on me, guys. I'm too far back, so it may be 14. I'll find it. Don't panic. 21, 14, and 15. Yeah, I don't know why I got 11. I left the 2 off. Jesus entered the temple area, drove out all who were buying and selling. He overturned the tables. It is written, my house will be called a house of prayer, but you've made it a den of thieves. Here it comes, 14 and 15, Matthew 21. The blind and the lame came to him at the temple, and he healed them. That you don't usually get in Luke. Well, you don't get it at all in Luke and Mark. He had done the cleansing of the temple, overturning tables, chasing out the doves, and all of that. He taught them. That's important, and that's a continuation of what you had said. And he had begun to heal people, healing them right in the temple. Now then, of those 3 things, what's the problem? They're coming to him and attempting to correct him, rebuke him, to plot against him on the basis of those 3 things. He was teaching in the temple. What's wrong with teaching in the temple?
It's a house of prayer, supposedly.
And it's supposed to be teaching and prayer and inviting people, and it should be teaching. So this may be the teachers of the law that are upset about that part. The teachers of the law, hey, that's our job. Show me your license to do any teaching.
There must be some kind of hierarchy.
It's all of these people are hierarchical. What about the overturning of tables and stuff? Is there anything wrong with that? And that's where the chief priests show up and say, why are you... So in other words, these 3 things that he was doing may be directed to these 3 audiences or these 3 groups of people that showed up. The teachers are concerned about him teaching. The chief priests of the temple are concerned about the smacking of, dealing with the mercantile end of it all. And then if we're right at all, the healing, well, there's a sense in which healing should have been in the elders. Remember in James chapter 5, it's the passage I quote every time I anoint. If any of you are sick, brothers, let them call upon the elders of the church, and they will anoint with oil and pray. They will pray and anoint with oil in the name of the Lord Jesus. James chapter 5, verses 13 to 16. I hadn't put this together until sitting down and talking with you, but I knew about the 3 things that they had seen him do. These things, I think, are teaching, healing, and then the overturning the tables. And it so happens that the chief priests, the elders, and the teachers of the law all have vested interests in each of those things. I hadn't put that together, so thank you for teaching me there. What were they wanting to do with this? Not just get rid of all.
In the previous, they were saying, the chief priests and teachers of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him, for they feared him.
Yeah.
Because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. So he's upsetting the whole, hierarchy, their structure.
We all have our little niches, and we all like to protect our stock in trade here. And he's coming along, and man, if we let him go, and plus, again, this is Passover, 1 million, perhaps even 2 million strong as population. When they say they fear him, but they also fear the people, you got to remember that. And there are a lot of people that are around and finding somebody who can heal them, somebody who can teach them, and somebody who meets them at their level and not ripping them off, somebody who's dealing fair and square and dealing with these merchants of religion. Yeah, they're interested in him. He's handling most of the problems that the idiocy of Judaism has erected in its.
Everybody's out to breed.
That's it. There's nothing new here. Oh, let me think. Religion and money. Who would have ever thought of those two things, right? You have anything like that?
In Orlando, something world, Bible World or whatever it is. They have a free day every year. Well, 4 of us went to go and we were in a line. It was like 7 hours long, but they were only open another 3 hours, so we left. But anyway, the normal price to get in there is like $60 a person. I hear it's not all that good, but I hear it's okay. But $60 a person, this is supposed to be a Christian, whatever it is. How can you charge them like that?
Well, it is a non-for-profit organization.
Yes.
I'm saying with my tongue in my cheek.
Like Catholic Church. They have those stuff in the basements all over the Vatican and everywhere else, all gold and, treasures and everything else. Why don't they open them up and start giving them out to people in need?
I remember a story, and I keep forgetting to look it up who it was. I think it was Thomas Aquinas, has an audience with the Pope, and the Pope shows him the treasures. And the Pope then makes reference to, just the vast sum of money and wealth. And he says, do you see that no longer can the church say, silver and gold have I none? And Aquinas, I'm going to give it to him because it seems like it's him. I'll have to look it up and I'll correct it. But his response was, the Pope says, so you can see that no longer can we say silver and gold have I none. And he says, and neither can you say, get up, rise and walk. That was in the book of Acts where, the apostles go through and say, silver and gold have I none, but arise and walk. And Aquinas says, yeah, you have silver and gold, plenty of that. So that's gone, but neither can you say arise and walk. So I think there's a lot to be done with that. And here is Jesus with all of Jerusalem, silver and gold on display, saying, rise and walk. And they don't like that. They don't like that because whatever else, they'll get the idea, they meaning followers of Jesus, that grace is free, that you don't have to pay for religion. And
You do in this country.
By the way, there is a ticket price now for this Bible study.
Okay.
It's a cover charge. If the Holy Land can charge $60, I'll just give you, $10.
Well, it's all about it really establishment versus anti-establishment.
Yeah.
And that's real. And we've seen that even in our own history, where there's the clashes between establishment versus anti-establishment.
And
So like you said, nothing new under the sun.
no, there isn't.
So-
And this is classic America in the 21st century. They show up, these 3 groups of people, the teachers of the law, the elders, and the chief priests, and they're wanting to know his credentials because professionals always want to know your credentials. You find 2 pastors meet, first thing out of their mouths usually are, where did you study? Where did you study?
And one upsman.
Yeah, well, and that, God help us, yeah. If you had told me what pastors were like when God was calling me into the ministry, I would have said, really? Yeah. In those days, I thought it was a noble profession. Now I see it as a necessary. Yeah. What do you say? Their question is designed to put them on the spot. It's where they continually go to. They seem to be scheming among themselves. And again, remember, these are the PhDs and the DDs and the THDs of theology in their day. They have conspired to do this. As he read in verse 18, the chief priests and the teachers are looking and plotting a way to kill him, looking for a way to kill him. The hit is out, and now this is what they come up with. Let me see your credentials. They were interested in it. Surely this group of 1 million, 2 million Jews in for the holy days would be interested in seeing how absolutely ignorant this man is. when he says, yeah, I only got my degree in theology from the Sears Roebuck School of Theology, then they'll probably clamp the lid on him because they want learned people. They have convinced themselves that learned people are the ones that matter. And Jesus, as you said, answers their question with a question. Go ahead, Scott.
Now, as far as their question, as far as who gave you the authority, that no matter, he says, God my Father gives me authority, or as they were saying, Satan gives him the authority. Both answers are wrong as far as for them to convict him of some kind of punishable crime under their law.
You got it.
So,
Yeah.
So
he has
it's a no-win scenario.
Well, and that's what they're trying to do. Rock and a hard spot, or even better, frying pan and fire. It will get him in one of these that he cannot wheedle out of. He just simply can't. So on this one, what's the rock? If he says this, we got him here. If he says that, we got him here. If he says, I'm doing it on my own authority, aha. We're teachers of the law. We condemn this. We are the elders of Judaism. This cannot stand. If he says, and he gives us an authority that we recognize, then we got him there. Because he was never duly sworn in by a chief rabbi. He was never schooled in one of the rabbinic colleges, none of that. So that's the rock and the hard spot, the frying pan and the fire. They're trying to get him out. Again, the horns of the dilemma. When he asks the question, is he answering their question?
In a sense. So, they can justify their decision.
Yeah, exactly. He turns it back on them and says, let's think through this, fellas. Do you say I don't have any credentials? Now, he's done something that I didn't draw attention to the past couple of weeks. He's quoted from Isaiah, and he's quoted from Jeremiah. Jeremiah about the den of robbers, Isaiah about the place for the prayers of the nations. He's quoted those. And he's certainly pointed to the evidence that those two teachings of Jeremiah as a den of robbers, my temples become a den of thieves. And there it is. And they knew full well, certainly the chief priests knew as you were doing this, Steve, yeah, there's payola. There was money coming into the till from them confiscating one poor guy's land and selling him one at an exorbitant exchange rate, and then taking that lamb and handing it off to the next guy, and taking their filthy silver with pagan head images stamped on it from the countries they're coming from, and coming to Jerusalem and saying, you can't offer that to Jehovah. It's got pagan idols on the front of it. God said, make no graven images, and yet there's Caesar's head right on it. So, for a price, we'll exchange your filthy tyrant silver for good old Jewish prutas and denarii, and I'm forgetting the one word that they use. But anyway, you get the concept. And they'll charge you then, we're going to be defiled by touching these things, so, it's going to cost you. So there it is. That's the den of robbers part. Where they set up and did their table exchanges and their flocks of doves and all of that was right around the perimeter, which was the porch of the Gentiles. It was the colonnade for the Gentiles. They could come there and expect to be able to pray and worship. And Israel had said, we really don't like Gentiles whatsoever. They're dogs. And why would you leave a dog park beside the holy spot? So they got rid of it. He quotes those two and shows evidence in front of them. And he could have, and he's already done it. The fact that they're asking this says these PhDs and these THNs and these DDs and these reverend sorts were clueless. Number one, he could have said, I quoted to you Jeremiah and Isaiah, and then I can go on and quote to you from the rest of the prophets. And I'm here under prophetic authority. Do we all not have the prophets and know what worship should be based on the prophets? But I've quoted to you from the prophets, and you still want to kill me. Now the next passage in chapter 12 is over that very thing, about them killing the servants that came to them in order to get the fruit from the vineyard of the owner of the vineyard. More about that at another time. He then says this, you tell me what you think of John the Baptist. Oh, man. He just rolled a grenade under their petticoats. What was that grenade meant for? How does he turn it back on them and put them on the horns of a dilemma?
Is John is he baptized in the name of man, or is he baptized in the name of the Father?
And if he says the Father,
Who gives him the authority?
and it's John who then is baptizing in the authority of God Almighty, who said of me, behold the Lamb that takes away the sins of the world. He would have quoted that one willingly and gladly. So they can't go that route. They can't say John was from, because if they also acknowledge that John was from Jehovah, sent by the Father, they had to do some real damage control. What had they done with John? Beheaded him. They had beheaded him, and when he was there in ministry, what had they done with John? Ignored him.
Yeah.
They just ignored his pitiful hind end. Anybody with camel underwear and eating bugs couldn't be worth going out to take notice of. Let him go. You know, whatever else Israel is good for, it's good for creating wackadoodles. And so they simply poo-pooed him. So if he's from God, why did you dismiss him so impolitely? If they say it wasn't, what do you have breathing down your neck as these three schools of thought, the elders, the teachers, and the priests? And 2 million people who believed in John's ministry. He was a very popular figure. And again, the passage that you took us to, which was a very good catch, the chief priests and the teachers, so 2 out of the 3 that are here this day, they began to look for a way to kill him, for they feared him because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. The whole crowd is in favor of this man. And so they reason among themselves, and what do they come up with? What's their answer? And again, and this is the reason I keep emphasizing it, this is the cream, the upper crust. This is the best Judaism has to offer. This is in the holy place, and these are holy men doing this, and here's their answer they come up with.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Very humble.
Yeah, they're scratching their collective bald spots and saying, we don't know. So did they know? They knew exactly that he had turned this back on them. That son of a gun. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so the crowd around them, they just lost points with the crowd as far as being the established leaders.
Yeah.
This has come back to bite them in the butt.
Yeah.
So
Now then go back and look at those 2 things again. You're having a problem with healing at the temple, and me putting an end to the merchandising in the temple, and me actually teaching in the temple. You're wanting to know why I'm doing your job for you. And why does any of these things, as we saw in verse 27, why do any of these things you're asking me about trouble you? In other words, he's turning it right back on them. and saying, I quoted Jeremiah and Isaiah to you. You didn't get that. And teaching and healing and the free offer of worship is what this place is about. You who represent this temple don't even know why you're here. I'm here to straighten it out because you dudes have so gummed this place up. It's got to be straightened out. And this is my Father's house, and zeal of his house hath consumed me. All right, if you got that one, then you're ready for chapter 12. Thank you. We did make it to 12. Chapter 12, let's turn the page here and read the parable of the tenants. He then began to speak to them in parables. Remember, when you come to that word, parables, you're supposed to hear the organ music. Bum, bum, bum. Parables? Yeah. This continues what he had just given them. So I think this actually goes at the same time. They don't give him an answer, and he says, neither will I tell you by what authority I'm doing these things. Oh, by the way, let me tell you a story. A man planted a vineyard, put a wall around it, dug a pit for the winepress, and built a watchtower. Then he rented the vineyard to some farmers and went away on a journey. At harvest time, he sent a servant to the tenants to collect from them some of the fruit of the vineyard. But they seized him and beat him and sent him away empty-handed. Then he sent another servant to them. They struck this man on the head and treated him shamefully. He sent still another, and that one they killed. He sent many others. Some of them they beat, others they killed. He had one left to send, a son whom he loved. He sent him last of all, saying, they will respect my son. But the tenants said to one another, this is the heir. Come, let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. So they took him and killed him and threw him out of the vineyard. What then will the owner of the vineyard do? Will he come and kill those tenants and give the vineyard to others? Haven't you read this scripture? The stone the builders rejected has become the capstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in his eyes. Then they looked for a way to arrest him because they knew he had spoken this parable against them. But they were afraid of the crowds, so they left him and went away. Again, Jesus is all wise. And in case you think he doesn't know what you're going through, you fall back to these teachings and say, no, nothing's caught him by surprise. You cannot put Jesus on the spot. Jesus is in control continually. And this story goes with the one previous to it. What do you see here? This parable of the tenants.
Greed.
I'm sorry?
Greed.
Greed, which goes right to the cleansing of the temple. All those money changers, all of those that sold confiscated sheep and resold them for profits to the next goober that walked through the gate. Yeah, there's greed, certainly greed.
Arrogance, I'm thinking.
And the two go together, doesn't it? Yeah, the two goes together. You get enough tchotchkes, to use your word again, and that's not to pick on the kids, but you get enough tchotchkes, you're going to think you deserve those tchotchkes at some point. What else do you see here? What's the big lesson?
Well,
It's about the temple again. Think temple here. What's the big lesson here that Jesus is giving them?
This is your last chance.
Last chance gas. And the next chapter Mark 13 is where we turn to the prophecy of the Olivet Discourse. Not one stone will be left on top of another here. That's coming. So all of this is simply stacking up. These are like cars in the railroad. They're all connected. They seem to us disjointed because of the chapter and verse divisions and stuff. These all go together. Then he began to teach them a parable. It goes with what went on before, which linked to these things. We're troubled about these things, Jesus. Why are you doing these things? What are these things? The healing, the teaching, and the ending of the commerce in the temple. Go ahead. What else do you see here? Greed and arrogance. Anything else stand out?
Stubbornness.
Good.
I mean, yes, you have brought it up in other studies, is that, with all the prophets, time and time again, there's nothing new under the sun, as you say. So every time, God would send a prophet to Israel, there would be either some type of response or a rejected response. And it would just be that cycle of, continuing on through the centuries.
Yeah.
To the time of reckoning here.
I love it. How does this story fit with their question about whose authority?
They turned a deaf ear on authority.
Yeah. You're all that concerned about authority? Have you had anyone show up in the entire history of this nation with authority from God? It's not about authority. It's about greed and arrogance and stubbornness. You got it. Yeah. Who were the prophets, men? The prophets showed that they had authority from God. God gave me a vision to give to Israel. And what did you do with them? Invariably, you stoned them. You killed them. You beat them. Because you didn't want to hear it. You didn't want to hear it. So you killed them. You got it. That's it. Yeah. And maybe that, when you're seeing this dynamic playing out, maybe that's why early on in his ministry, in the very first sermon he gave, the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus peers over at them all and says, you can't serve two masters. You can't serve mammon and God. You're going to love one and hate the other. You're going to serve one and despise the other. And he's coming to that very nub. I think it's a pacifier for the American people that we clearly state, in God we trust on our money. But you and I fully well know who we trust in when we're collecting all of those. Yeah. The real God we exchange for paper. That's all it is. It used to be at least some minerals behind it, silver and gold, but can't even say that's behind it anymore. What's behind our monetary? Just an idea. And you're now seeing the idea fade. What's the point? Why exchange the true God of heaven for that which means nothing? Having said that, make sure you pay the $10 on your way out today. Anything else here that you saw? Well, let's turn over to Isaiah 5 and get a background to this. Again, he's referencing the prophets in this. By whose authority? Well, I've quoted to you the prophets. You're not going to take it under prophetic authority. But then again, you've never taken it under prophetic authority. Here, listen to this one. Isaiah chapter 5. This is referred to as the Song of the Vineyard. It's the first 7 verses. I will sing to the one I love, a song about his vineyard. My loved one had a vineyard on a fertile hillside. He dug it up and cleared it of stones and planted it with the choicest vines. He built a watchtower in it and cut out a wine press as well. Then he looked for a crop of good grapes. But it yielded only bad fruit. Now you dwellers of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more could I have done for my vineyard than I have done for it? When I looked for good grapes, why did it yield only bad? Now I will tell you what I'm going to do to my vineyard. I will take away its hedge, and it will be destroyed. I will break down its wall, and it will be trampled. I will make it a wasteland, neither pruned nor cultivated, and briars and thorns will grow there. I will command the clouds not to rain on it. The vineyard of the Lord Almighty is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are the garden of light. And he looked for justice, but found or only saw bloodshed, and righteousness, but he heard cries of distress. That is a prophecy of the destruction of the temple. I'm going to knock down the walls. This one, this little parable in Mark 12 is setting us up for the big grand reveal in Mark 13, the Olivet Discourse. But he's calling on this passage. Did you see the language? He bought a vineyard, he cleared it, he put up a watchtower, and he dug a wine press. All of that is in Jesus' parable. He's borrowing out of that imagery. He's got the teachers of the law and the chief priests and the elders that would have all been familiar with Isaiah 5. And he goes and revisits it, and he adds a couple of little twists to it. What twist do you find in Jesus' parable from Isaiah 5?
Just they threw all the prophets.
Yeah, he sent over and over and over in the parable certain ones to come and get it, and they kill some of them and beat others. And the other part is what? The Son. The Son is the new twist on it. And so he is adding to it, and also
Upping the ante.
he is upping the ante. And can I wonder out loud this? With the group that he's got around him, has he given any prophecy about these men before? This groups that are there? Has Jesus prophesied about these? Remember the 3 times or the 4 times he predicted his death in Jerusalem? Remember who he said was going to do the death? It's going to be the chief priests and the teachers of the law and the elders. Is he upping the ante intentionally to get these men in a position of a day and a half, 2 days away to show up and arrest him and try him? You wonder that. Because he knew who it was. You could recognize them by their outfits. Certainly the chief priests would have had on clerical garments. Probably you could recognize the teachers of the law, the scribes, by the ink on their forefinger and middle finger. I'm trying to be fun there, and the elders, you could tell them by just
They roll.
yeah. Well, and there are also those that are sour and dour and were baptized in lemon juice and battery acid. They tend to be sad men, you know. He could tell. He knew who they were. And is this an act of provocation? I don't think he's doing it beyond proportion. I don't think he has to, and he knows it. But I certainly think there's a human side of this that he waited to now to give this. This is the last week. This is Tuesday of the last week. And if we've got it right by Wednesday night, it's set in motion against him. Go ahead.
Not only
Not
is
for
this
nothing.
pricking the ears of those 3 groups, but think about the crowds that are now have been exposed to this and are now wondering, who's he talking about? Are these the ones that he's talking about? So
Good.
Again, it's not just on the ears of the elders, chief priest and teachers of the law, but it is falling on the ears of the crowds that are surrounding him.
Yes.
So I can understand why they'd be in fear, because they could be the ones that are on the other end of the beating stick by a mob.
Yeah.
So
The other, I'm sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, go. Go ahead.
No, I
On
just
the other end of the beating stick.
yeah,
so.
I just think it's interesting how he continually exposes the fact that they have take as far as keepers of the law and should know the law. The first commandment is have no other gods before me.
And do the Steve Saylor thing, and they had plenty of guns.
And they have replaced the law with what they think is best for God.
Yeah.
And their service to God is better than the law.
Yeah.
And talk about putting yourself as a God.
You got it.
But
But that goes from the very day that he gave the law. When God is inscribing the law on the tablets, they're down at the base of the mountain making their idol. And what was it made out of? Essentially money. They were worshiping a golden calf. Well, what is that? Part divine, part monetary. And that's how we always do it.
But time and time again, they turn a blind eye, thinking they knew better than the prophets.
Yes.
And
see, these passages, to bring this together, these passages should, in many ways, cause us to back up and just examine ourselves. Yeah, it's okay, and it's, in fact, in many ways, almost a delicious fun to point out the sheer folly of the Jewish scholars. We have no Christian scholars capable of this? And the answer is, no, we do. And then it would explain a whole lot of things about the Church of Jesus in America. And as you'll see in Revelation 2 and 3 on Sunday, it's a temptation that believers can fall into very quickly. You know, we can fall into these patterns because this is the conditioned mind of a sinful nature. This is where we go. When God gets difficult, we go to the places we're comfortable and whatever else, having some money in my wallet or a fatter portfolio or some security. I can't trust God for it, so I'll fall on what I know. I'll earn income. And we then create idols. The human heart's an idol-making factory, as John Calvin said. And you're seeing it here. And when he cuts through, Jesus cuts through all of these, it ain't comfortable. When he mentions in Isaiah 5 about him taking down the hedges, that's essentially him, Jesus that is, doing his reassessment of the Jewish teachings on the law. They had built up the hedges around the law. And Jesus is clipping down the hedgerows to get to the heart of it all. And that doesn't sit well. You know,
how many sub laws were there? There were what, 300 laws?
365.
365. How many sub laws were there for each one?
Volumes. It's called the Talmud. And not only do you get the Talmud, you get in the Talmud, you get the Mishnah and the Gemara. The Mishnah is one part, the Gemara is another, which is there's the law, here's what we say and believe and hold on to and rabbinic traditions, and then the Gemara is this is how you put it into practice, and this is what you don't do and do, and this is that, and you get, don't carry a burden on the Sabbath. It gets, down to the small little details of how much is a burden.
Whatever.
You got it. How far can you travel? What's that?
can't wash your hands.
Yeah.
Your own hands to work.
All of it is. And so today, what do? And one of my sons had been hired as one. We were in a really, really large population of Orthodox Jews in Morristown, North Jersey. The Rabbinical College of America was in Morristown. And when Sabbath would come, They couldn't flip on switches and they couldn't do certain things, so they would hire Sabbath goyim, meaning Sabbath Gentiles, to come in and
Do the work that
you
they
got it. God forbid they have a leaky pipe, they might just leave it because it would be work. But they'll hire on,
It's okay for other people to do the
yeah.
So,
Well, what's a Gentile except the beast of burden, Well, let's hold it there and end it with prayer. By the way, if you do not know Jesus Christ, he's not at all like the world portrays him. He's portrayed as mean and self-centered and somehow a God of anger and wrath. If you don't equate him with that, you'll equate God the Father in the Old Testament, the God who destroys nations in order to get the Jewish people into the promised land. You have to understand something. The God of the Old Testament is the God of the New Testament in Christ Jesus. He took on human nature. God the Father sent his Son to take on human nature in order to die, because as an eternal, everlasting being, an infinite being, he couldn't die. But the only thing that would help us out of our sinful and punished position is for some kind of sacrifice on our behalf. Well, blood of bulls and goats that you see so often in the Old Testament, it couldn't carry away, it couldn't atone, it couldn't satisfy the wrath of God. It was just animal blood. What it did was remind God that sin was serious and remind the people who offered those beasts that unless an innocent is killed in my place, a substitute made in my place, there's no atoning for it. That was simply previews of what Jesus would do. Who is Jesus? He's God, eternal God, come in a body in order to die. Why die? To pay the penalty. The wages of sin is death. You may not agree with that. That doesn't matter if you agree with it. There's plenty of things you've been wrong about. And this one, those are the words of God. The wages of sin is death. You will get a payday someday. And if you die with that penalty hanging out there, those wages ready to be earned completely, you'll die in hell forever. Good news is, he's made a way of getting out of that. He poured sin on Christ, the sin of those who believe Jesus died for. And the one who believes in Jesus' work on the cross is the one that God says, you've now paid the price to get into heaven. The price isn't $60 to get into the Holy Land. The price is the blood of Jesus Christ to get into heaven. If you've never trusted his work and not your own for heaven, then you must do so. Because the only thing that saves is salvation by grace through faith in the work of Jesus Christ. You can do that this very moment. Simply bow your head and ask God for that gift. And the assurance is, whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. So do that. Again, my name is Charlie Hara. I'm at Christ Church, and Christ Church meets at the Seaville Fire Company in the banquet hall on Route 50 in beautiful downtown Seaville. I got my Seaview and my Seaville wrong. It's Seaville, right off of the Garden State Parkway going north at exit 20. And if you're coming south on it, you have to get off at Marmora and meander down Route 9. And you'll eventually come to a McDonald's. Hang right there at McDonald's, and that's Route 50, and we're about 3/4 of a mile in. If you know where Dino's restaurant is, Dino's Diner, right across the street, and you'll be able to find us. 10:30 on Sunday mornings. If you need to find more of these broadcasts, and they're scattered on Facebook and YouTube, you can find them under Christ Church Upper Township. Upper Township is the municipality in which Seaville and Marmora are located in. Christ Church Upper Township. Our email address is Pastor Charlie. My email address is pastorcharlie@christchurch.church. Pastor Charlie, spelled with an I-E, not a Y. Pastor Charlie at christchurch.church. And our website address is christchurch.church. With that, we give you a goodbye. Join us again next week when we hit into the 12th chapter again of Mark's Gospel. We hope to see you. We hope we're broadcasting, streaming, and all of that. Have a good day.